Chapter 5, Relations between Old and Young, Child Raising, the Black Extended Family. Extended families are old institutions. Aged, extended family members, believing that the old-fashioned ways of preparing young members for living in America have made for the maintenance of the family and the welfare of its members, seek to impart those ways to the young. Their qualification for such a role, in their view, is that they have survived odds more brutal than those their young relatives will ever face. But times are changing. Many aged blacks, we found, are not satisfied that the young people today are listening to them. Tradition. The old-fashioned ways of bringing up children have been handed down to the aged from generations before them. The aged themselves were brought up to the old ways. Child raising in black family tradition rested upon religious beliefs, strict discipline, respect for parental authority, and reliance on experience. The aged were nourished on a philosophy of hope, perseverance, and faith in God. By trusting in God, one could make a way out of no way. No matter how big the problem or how great the evil, nobody and nothing was bigger than God. God was close at hand, awaiting his children's call to intervene in their life and help them through troubled times. All they had to do was gather up the strength to persevere, do their best, and never lose hope that God would come and set everything right. Strength, perseverance, hope, and faith are what aged blacks have sought to instill in their extended families. The spirituals richly express that faith. I've come this far by faith, leaning on the Lord, trusting in his holy words, and never yet failed me. And, oh, by and by, I'm gonna lay down my heavy load and walk together, children. Don't you get weary. Linked to religious beliefs is the call for strict discipline and respect for parental authority. The aged know, of course, that they did many of the things they counsel the young not to do. That they have learned, they claim, to accept life and acknowledge reality in all its goodness and all its brutality, to reject pretenses, and to see life the way it is. Reliance on time-proven experience is often expressed by the aged maxim passed down from earlier generations of blacks, black and white. Do the best you can. Learn to do without. Or be thankful for what you've got. Nothing good comes easy. Or a rolling stone never gathers any moss. Blood is thicker than water. Experience is the best teacher, perhaps most important. Make a way out of no way. Are maxims often repeated by the aged in their day-to-day activities of bringing up the young in the extended family. Imparting values. The aged have their own way of building moral character. Religion. Middle-aged family members in our study would often tease their aged parents, saying they waited until they got old to get religion. Some of the aged, finding little reason to go to church regularly themselves, believe it is important for blacks to establish a relationship with God by attending church. Many aged blacks believe in the old-time religion. They feel close enough to God to communicate with him on a personal basis. They look to God mainly to help them in the things they cannot do for themselves. The aged are especially concerned that young people are moving away from God. They see this as the cause of much of the confusion among young blacks. They insist that parents should teach their children that God is at the center of all things good and can make even the impossible possible. They fear that their families and their communities are in danger of deterioration because of increasing irreverence and unbelief. Discipline. Though most major decisions made in the extended family are concerned with the welfare of the children, children have little or no say in family matters. The aged generally think that children should be seen and not heard. Children are expected to show respect for older people, not get sassy with grown people, and to do what they are told. Aged family members believe that the most convincing tools for getting their children to mind are the switch and the strap. When children misbehave, the aged are quick to invoke the maxim that a hard head makes a soft behind. They believe in quick and decisive discipline so that the child will have no doubt regarding their intent and what they consider to be wrong or right behavior. Since family welfare is perennially at stake, a child cannot have his way. The aged think a child should be taught that nothing he has can be taken for granted. They are therefore in favor of punishing or reprimanding children for abusing their clothing, wasting food, or misusing money. Children should also be reprimanded for punishing for acting too grown, talking back to their elders, biting the hand that feeds them. In relation to other children, however, youth should be punished for failing to stand up for what is right, for not protecting their own blood, or sometimes for backing down in a fight. Youth should be able to hold their own in peer group rivalry and conflict. The aged believe that standing one's ground, respecting authority, and not taking things for granted are necessary conditions for living in the world. Because what children learn and how they behave can send waves throughout the entire extended family network, the aged think any family member, not only parents, should be free to punish a child for acting contrary to the best interests of the extended family. Under certain conditions, it is appropriate even for neighbors to punish children if they catch them doing something wrong. It is not unusual for the extended family of the past, aged family members told us, for a child to be punished by an uncle, an aunt, grandparent, older brothers and sisters, or a neighbor. The aged are convinced that lack of present-day adherence to this practice has resulted in children who are sassy and disrespectful to their elders. As little Marshall put it, the children act more grown than their parents, and parents act as if they're afraid they'll be beaten by their children. Education. The aged encourage youth to get a good education, though they know the material means to pursue higher education are seldom available. Aged blacks stress the importance of learning some sense, but many are quick to warn their children against letting a good education lead them away from God. Others feel that too much education can deprive a person of common sense or a mother wit. Ella Jackson expressed concern that nowadays, with more education opportunities available to them, black youth seem to place little value on education. Some teenagers see education as a white man's tool to brainwash them, but older blacks are firm in their conviction that education is a means of beating the white man in his own game. Work. Elderly family members hope to teach the young the necessity of hard work to ensure the survival of the extended family and to get something out of life. Young family members are expected not only to do domestic chores as a means of learning the importance of work, but to be prepared and willing to find work and help support the family if it should become necessary for family survival. Millie Roman recalled, for example, a time when only 7 adults in her entire extended family network were able to find employment. In the Roman-based household and throughout the sub-extended families, younger members are encouraged to take any work they can find. One of Millie's grandsons at the time of our study was the only family member in the base household with a full-time job. At the age of 15, he became one of the chief family providers. Even though education is stressed in the Roman family, he had to drop out of school for 2 years until more adults, especially adult males, could find work. Young people are also expected to contribute to family survival by cooking, cleaning house, and even raising children when both parents have to work outside the home. Aged family members are troubled by the fact that youth people shy away from manual labor. Some do not object to work, as Mona Tyler put it, so long as they don't get their fingernails dirty. Young blacks tend to see what one youth called hard, back-breaking work, manual labor, as demeaning, whereas the work industry of the elderly blacks showed that there was hardly a job, back-breaking or not, they would pass up, or more accurately, could afford to pass up. The age felt that family survival depended on the willingness of its able-bodied members to work, not necessarily at a preferred job, but at any job that was available. Sex. Sex is seldom discussed openly with younger family members until they become teenagers, and even then not extensively. Yet the family attitude is communicated to children loud and clear. Aged family members usually do not see sex in terms of good or bad. They are more concerned with the possible consequences of too early sex initiation than with morality. When sex is discussed, it is generally to warn girls that they must not engage in sex, not because it is evil, but because they are not mature enough to handle sex and its possible consequences. They are warned that a good man does not want to marry a woman who is known for having an active sex life. This is not intimate, however, that this is not to intimate, however, the aged believe men want to marry only virgins. The aged blacks we talked with were more lenient with boys than with girls as in regard to sex. As long as a boy does not get caught or bring home a stray baby or a social disease, or get hooked up with a fast girl, or otherwise cause the family trouble in his experimentation with sex, the aged seldom voice any opposition. However, any recognized or suspected experimentation with sex on the part of girls may at once be seen as trouble for the entire family because the result could be pregnancy and another mouth to feed. Generally, the aged feel that the young are becoming reckless and irresponsible regarding sex. They are adamant that girls be aware of the necessity of keeping their dresses down and their drawers up, and staying away from no good, bad boys who have but one thing on their minds. On the other hand, some youth feel that what the older people don't know won't hurt them. Further discussion of attitudes towards sex, the reader is referred to Chapter 6. Marriage. Marriage in the extended family will also be discussed in the following chapter. We may point out here, however, that the aged have their own criteria for selecting a good partner, and they attempt to get other family members to accept these criteria. Women are encouraged to select a good, hard-working man who is a good provider, who does not run around, and who will do right by his woman. A man should show his wife respect, show that he can be trusted, see marriage as a sacred institution not to be violated by loose morality, and take full responsibility for dependence. Men are encouraged to select a good woman, skilled at performing domestic duties, willing to work to supplement the income of her husband, not wanting a lot of fancy things, a woman who does not fool around and is committed to doing right by her man. Aged family members believe that youth are less concerned with finding a good man or woman than someone who looks good or who dresses fancy or who has a bad ride, a good-looking car, or with whom they are in love. Being in love is fine, the aged think, but it is secondary to selecting a spouse who is committed to doing right by his mate. Mutual aid. We have already pointed out the importance of kinship obligations in the extended family. All members of the extended family are expected by the aged to take on flexible roles for survival of the family network. Youth might end up as providers while adults perform domestic chores. The aged try to inculcate in youth the idea that they should stand up for their kin and never turn their back on relatives. Old people want to be seen as having devoted most of their lives to the welfare of their kinfolk. Race. Although a few of the aged blacks in our study express a preference for light skin over darker skin, most try to instill in children the idea that the blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice. This maxim also has sexual connotation. They are careful not to foster in children the belief that they are mentally or morally inferior to white people. Millie Roman stated that she had seen too many dumb, sick, and crazy white folks to have her children believing in any notion of white supremacy. Lily Marshall held that as a domestic servant, she had helped to keep alive too many old whites her own age to believe that whites were superior to blacks. Aged blacks teach children in the family that all men are equal in the eyes of God and that we are all God's children. On the other hand, they point out experience dictates that few whites are to be trusted and no whites can be expected to side with a black against another white. The general thrust of the aged in teaching the youth to deal with racism is to follow examples set by the aged. Youth should learn to live with racism and to step around it when necessary or if possible. Aged blacks, for the most part, accept racism as a natural part of being black and living in America. Some even feel a kind of personal victory in having survived racism in its most vicious forms, time and time again. The aged have been trained, on the whole, to fight. Some even feel a kind of personal victory in having survived racism in its most vicious forms, time and time again. The aged have been trained, on the whole, to fight racism indirectly as a family and as individuals, but not to combat it as part of an organization or a social movement designed for the purpose. They seek to train children in the same manner, because few can envision an individual, a family, or a group having any success in a head-on collision with something as deep-rooted as racism. Young people, they believe, should learn techniques for surviving racism and should not waste time and energy fighting head-on or even be overly preoccupied with it. Since the structure of the American society ensures that whites can function more easily and fully in it than blacks, youth must be prepared to work twice as hard as whites in order to survive. Younger family members tend to regard the aged as too conservative in their approach to racism. The aged, on the other hand, expect the younger generation to take a more aggressive stance. At the same time, they resent being labeled Uncle Toms for their old time-proven ways of dealing with racism. Country. The aged blacks in our country feel at home in America. Despite the hard times they have seen, they believe that America is better for them than any other country they could live in. Besides, they feel they have witnessed much progress made in America on behalf of black people. They try to instill in young blacks the faith that America is their country too, that progress is being made daily in America's treatment of black people. The aged cannot understand how they, who have suffered the worst of America's treatment of blacks, have made peace with America, whereas so many of the young, who have things far better than when the aged were young, are alienated from and bitter toward their country. Death. The aged, in our study, tend to see death as a reality which cannot be separated from life. Though often feared and always unwelcome, when death does come, it is perceived as no more frightening than life itself. It is seen as a terrifying entry into nothingness. It is often viewed by the aged as a much-needed and deserved rest for toiling in a troublesome world. This mood is reflected in the spiritual. Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am worn, through the storm, through the night. Lead me on to the light, take my hand, precious Lord, lead me on. Younger people are expected to know death and its meaning through the aged, for it is mainly the aged that relatives come for comfort when a family member dies. Children are to witness through the aged the importance of being strong, if not for themselves, then for other family members during a time of grief. Children are expected to learn the importance of pulling together as a family, as they have observed that the aged rallying family members together to face the death of a loved one. They are expected to understand, from the emphasis aged family members place on it, the importance of providing a deceased family member with nice funeral, one which the family can be proud to have given its kin. Young family members are to learn that the death of a family member is painful, no matter how long it has been expected. In some cases, they are to learn just how important a given family member was to a family's stability and welfare only after that person has died. For example, when 96-year-old Fanny Tate died, even though she had been ill during most of her last few years, it was difficult for many of her relatives to adjust to the fact that she was dead because she had been so important to the survival and happiness of the Tate extended family. Aged blacks are displeased with the attitudes of some younger family members regarding death. They think that youth is not showing God appreciation for giving them life. Some claim that the youth take life lightly because they are unaware of how short life is, or because they see death as part of being old and not part of being young as well. Thomas Dudley attributed this lack of seriousness to the fact that young people have limited exposure